Продовжимо наш.
We continue. Our working day will be talking about reforms in the sphere of energy sector. Mr. Volodymyr Demchyshyn, the Minister of Fuel and Energy. Good afternoon. Everyone starts reporting in advance about the results. Soon there will be a year of me holding the position of the minister. We have already reported on what we have done for the market and for consumers, so we decided to talk about that briefly also on the website of the Council of Reforms. We placed the information on the work done for this year, almost a year, 9 months. In the Ministry of Energy, we were also very actively working on different things. We were involved in operational work, preparation to the heating season. This is operational type of work. Parallel to that, I'm talking about categories, directions of the work of the ministry. The second direction is the work, legislative drafting, the regulations, bylaws, and the third direction of our work.
По суті, такі
And also the fundamental concepts, developing the concepts and the programs of development of different segments. There are several of them in the ministry, so I wanted to briefly mention the main directions of work. And I would like to mention one of them in detail, and that is on the law on the electricity market. There has been a lot of work done. We are planning to submit this draft for approval. That is the work similar to what has been done for the gas market. The law was passed in May. Now we have developed the secondary legislation. Not all the documents have been approved. There are many documents of the NERC which are at the stage of getting approved by the Ministry of Justice. That's the code of grids, the rules of use, typical contracts. More than 20 acts. The ministry has been working on the changes to legislation. The most recent one, 3325, introduces amendments to 17 different laws. I hope that they will be considered by the Verkhovna Rada, and I hope that they will get support, because these are the laws which, on the one hand, the changes suggested are on the one hand technical, but on the other hand they will remove all the contradictions between the existing laws and the new gas market laws. So we're just harmonizing the legislative basis. So I hope that this will be resolved. Besides the draft 3325, This week, I hope there will be 3074 considered. These are amendments to the Customs Code and 3073 amendments to Tax Code. They sound like technical ones. There's no limiting price. Also, some others include changes on methodology. We suggest cash method. Also, that is the issue for energy, electricity market. Also, in these markets, there were certain non-payments, and many efforts have been spent. If we calculate it not on a monthly basis, from time to time there are gaps, and now the 78% of payments are in electricity market, and the gas market, the level is at the level of 80% payments. I briefly mentioned that last time, but unfortunately we don't have enough statistical data for the current heating season. We will briefly talk about that next during the next briefing when we get the statistical data for October. Realistically, we'll see the situation only in the results of November, in the middle of December. Then we'll be able to talk about the level of payments. Besides these two laws, we have been actively working on the loan regulator. And the law was submitted and approved by the Cabinet of Ministers. It was submitted to the Verkhovna Rada. Now there are several processes going on. There are several initiatives on finalizing that law, but nevertheless it's all around two principles. The procedure of appointing nomination or creating nomination committee to nominate the candidates. We suggested, and I believe that's the right decision, we suggest that the candidates are to be approved by the presidents, like that has been happening in the last few years. And also the energy community was also discussing that issue, but I believe that we have convinced them that existing combination is more or less stable and adequate. The regulator, I will not explain why we need the regulator, but it's been in place for more than 10 years. There was no law on the regulator, but we are now reforming the market, and that means that we will need a very serious regulator who will be able to protect, first of all, the consumers. That is the key reason for that law, and also be a regulator in the market. It is important to regulate relations. between these subjects. I believe that these are three fundamental laws which give me the chance to say that this way we make the foundation for liberalization of all the markets which are under the responsibilities of the Ministry of Energy. That's the fourth draft that we are working on. It is lagging behind in dynamics. It's the law on the coal market. Because of different reasons, it's lagging behind.
Механізми ціноутворення.
Because we wanted to show the mechanism of pricing and taking into account the structure of the market. One player which has more than 70% share in the market, and the structure related to it is a key purchaser. Well, it is difficult to suggest some effective system of defining the price. We started the projects with IHS. We had several meetings with them, very useful. IHS as the institution, as a company, has merged with the analytical agency Maklovsky, which is specialized on the analysis. So it's very interesting to cooperate with them. And we are planning to analyze different indices, the indices of pricing. And we tried to use them for market pricing in Ukraine. Maybe this will be not via the exchange, but via certain indicative instruments which we will have to correct. Depending on what is reflected in indices. That is why the law is being delayed somewhat. And the third law that we are working on, which will be about responsibilities of the ministry, and the next one, which will allow us to reform different directions of the work of the ministry. That is about the norms. As to operational work, I would like to mention few things. The work on market, that's participation in negotiations, the protocols, which is important to form the actual price for consumers. And there were many expectations related to the fact that we will not be able to reflect in price what is the price at which the market buys from Gazprom. It will be impossible to include the cost of transportation. These are $30, which I mentioned, and that is what Russian side did not agree to. We were saying that there's an average price of the market in Poland by this price, but in the end, we, at all levels, conducted negotiations, and we managed to establish this price. And the price includes the cost, calorific value. We understand that the calorific value is higher than the norm, and Ukraine had to pay additional money. And that allows us to reduce the price at the European market. And also, we purchase at a price which is lower than $230. That is quite a positive trend. And there are many participants. I don't say that this is the ministry that has done it. Talking about nuclear energy sector, I mentioned several times that we are thinking about clean energy, especially in Ukraine. We're using only 70% of the capacity, and that is very low indicator. And this year we managed to increase it, but not sufficiently enough, because the real result will get only next year.
We actually construct the Kiev Rivne, which will help us in doing that. And parallel to that, we take care of the building Kakhovka Zaporizhzhia substation. Those two lines will enable us to additionally increase the generation by 1.5 gigawatts with the installed power. DH and Rivne Khmelnytsky, they worked with a load not more than 4,400, which was the maximum in the winter period. In summer period, it was even, the figure was less. At this point of time, we already can see very positive, big progress in construction of the two lines. Rivne Kiev will be commissioned by the end of this year. And last time I mentioned, when I was talking, when I said that today we do not use the power unit number 3 of the Rivne NPP, that's why we have to replace this capacity with imported energy, and the work on the Rivne power unit are nearing completion. Specifically, the day after yesterday, on Wednesday or Thursday of this week, we are going to take it back to include it to the energy grid and complete all the necessary works on the Rivne NPP, and to switch over to the Vinnytsia Chernobyl NPP, as far as I remember, a line in order to connect the line Rivne Kiev. Of course, there is a lot of work if you're talking about the Kiev energy junction, so to say, but there are a few of the work-related processes. So you're going to hear for a long time about the different work being in progress in connecting the 330 kilowatt overhead power lines. We had to include the district heating system gas modules, which are situated in Kiev and which cost twice as much, but I believe in the near future we'll be able, first of all, to optimize the system to let's say to distribute its energy from Rivne to Kiev, to the Kiev hub, so to say, Kiev junction, and within the framework of the balance sheet, which we are preparing now for the next year, you'll see the result of that. I believe that the use of the Energoatom capacities will be more efficiently used, and we'll be able to curb the increase of the tariffs for the electric power. You remember the discussions and a lot of talks in our discussion with DEC, how much should we increase the tariffs due to, and we had previously discussion how we should support investments in the future. So these were those things are going to stay with us, but given the support on the part of the Energoatom regarding the cheap or relatively cheap energy 42 kopecks. From the point of view of the prime cost is less than 92 kopecks per the heat generation. So we continue to work along those lines, and I believe this is a very important direction and rather successful. We have to be successful there. May I remind you about two more draft laws regarding the Galicia power sources. We actually, South Ukrainian PP power unit number 3 operates today. In Zaporizhzhia, we start on the power unit number 5 to implement the project for using the nuclear fuel, and also in South Ukraine nuclear power plant power unit number 2, we are going to use a different type of fuel, and next year we are going to use Westinghouse fuel for the 3 power units at least next year, which will enable us to diversify the energy supply, while also using different fuels from different suppliers to ensure the competition at this market, because actually used to supply 100% of the nuclear fuel for us, and this we are taking care of now. And another interesting project, we call it Coltec. This is the supplier of the equipment. And the general supplier within this project. We are talking about construction of a centralized spent fuel storage facility. And the project definitely is very interesting. It will give us an opportunity to save, maybe not 100% to save, but we are talking about $200 million, which now Ukraine spends for the interim or temporary storage of the spent fuel in the Russian Federation. So we'll be able to save a big amount of this money. And the payback period of this project is less than 3 years, which will give us a chance to decrease, or at least to slow down the inflation rate for, if you're talking about the cost of the electric power, first of all, due to the efforts of Energatom. A very interesting project to finish the construction of power units number 3 and 4 in the Khmelnytsky NPP nuclear power plant. So far, we're just in the beginning of the road, at the early stage. Perhaps you know that we denounced our agreements with the Russian Federation, and now we take care of the preparatory efforts to announce some kind of tender or the process of attraction of a new partner to finish the construction of those two mentioned power units. And I think, again, from the point of view of economic point of view, those power units, it is reasonable to finish their construction. And now we are seeking a potential partner, and I am positive this must be kind of international partner. In other words, given that those technologies are well developed in the Russian Federation, I think we are looking towards China or other potential partners, including Westinghouse and some other European companies, or partners which could be involved in this project. So we are trying to look in different directions, and again, I repeat myself, this is a very interesting project. Speaking of the work to increase the gas production, I'm not going to talk about that because the project is very complex, and I'm sure that the issues associated with the increase of the cost of the production of the Ukrainian gas will affect the motivation of other investors, maybe foreign investors, to come to Ukraine and invest their money. In any case, this is a correct step to take, and I believe that in the near future we are going to make it happen, and maybe we could expect the arrival of the foreign investors here next year. What also interesting, the work associated with the regulation of this process of issuance of the permissions. There are two different issues. Issuance of the special permissions, that's one idea, is to simplify the procedure, to make it understandable, transparent, and to decrease the number of those entities who can issue those permissions. And the problem is not that there is a big number of those, but there is no principle of single window or one window, or the principle to to shorten the terms for issuance, and there is no possibility or opportunity, for example, in case of failure to issue by some institution of such permission. We are talking about anyway. We should consider that as the permission being issued. In other words, if within some period of time somebody fails to agree upon that, this will be this entity's responsibility, and in this case, the permission should be regarded as issued one. And maybe this is the best part of this regulation process. Another interesting trend is the development of a concept. I already mentioned at the very beginning of my speech here that we took care of the concept to reform the coal industry, which was broadly discussed, and the trademarks, of course, had a lot of claims or complaints regarding this concept. Each time when I meet with IMF or with the so-called donors, I'm always raising that issue, and it's understood that without international support, it is very difficult to implement this process. Many European countries like Great Britain, Germany, and Poland, they went through this process over the last couple of decades, and they have understanding how to do that. And if you're talking about optimization or improvement of the efficiency of the operation of the mines without the external assistance, this issue becomes impossible. We need the programs regarding the retraining of the miners, both those who work underground and on the surface, so to say. We are talking about different operational environment, and in any case, we need money, and unfortunately, we need a lot of money to make this process implemented, and we hope that we'll find an external donor for this program, because we have big problems in our public budget. You could see that in the coalition agreement, there are certain indices mentioned there. For example, to decrease the subsidies for the coal industry within 4 to 5 years up to the year 2020 by 20% cut in the subsidies each year. And for example, last year we spent for this purpose 5 billion hryvnia. This year we received only 900 million to support those miners. I understand that there are more top priority channels to use those budgetary funds, so I cannot see how we can implement this project without the assistance given by external donors. Another program or project which we actually drawn up, we are talking about the nuclear industrial complex. I'm not going to talk about Energoatom company, but in order to create a vertical integration for our own, whatever it's applicable. We definitely cannot enrich uranium for some understandable reasons, but there are all the rest of the functions. Actually, we can take care of the enrichment of uranium through outsourcing. There are a lot of potential participants like Revo or other companies which could render such a service. So we'll try to build in Ukraine a vertical chain. Production of nuclear fuel without certain functions which we cannot realize. But we produce uranium ore and manufacture uranium concentrate, but the amount is not sufficient. We have to invest the additional extra money. This is a very interesting direction. We should make use of that, and we can increase the existing capacity by the factor at least of 2.5. And we have already plans of actions. We have to finalize it in order to increase the production of uranium concentrate, uranium ore production. Again, if we're talking about zirconium, which is used in the production of the fuel assemblies and the fabrication factory. Maybe many of you heard about the nuclear fuel production plant, but we are not talking exactly about production. It's kind of assembling of the fuel assemblies. Excuse me for this kind of expression. Certain parts of that fuel assemblies. So this chain, by all means, we have to implement. It's very cost effective, and I believe that the major funds must be spent for this specific objective with the cost of the tariff. Because if we rely too much upon the budget, this project will see its implementation in many years from now. We have to attract the external investors. We can try to do that, but so far we do not expect the external investors or foreign investors. So when we were in the Kazakhstan, we discussed the possible cooperation within this sector. The Kazakhstan has very interesting plans how to recover the uranium ore. They do not build special quarries or mines, but they start to take care of those kind of works through the subsurface works. When it's not reasonable to build a big mine, for example. This is a very interesting approach, and we are now in the process of exchange of our experience, and I hope that maybe next year we'll be able to implement similar projects here. In just few words about privatization. This is really a very big project, and seemingly the privatization, is not something within our competence. Well, actually, before we put some of the companies' enterprises on the list of those to be privatized, we prepare a lot of documents. We are talking about the land management and the title to ownership and the different permissible documents, whatever else, according to the questionnaires which the state property fund is preparing, and they're actively preparing for this procedure. Also, we mentioned the Obolenergo, the CHPP, and now we actually included in that list about 6 mines. So the process is underway. It's rather effort-consuming, not really visible. We do not have any visible results. I mean, the results from the point of view of the sales. Actually, the ministry, gave to the state property fund several dozens of the packages of documents. So, in my turn, I believe that we did a lot of work. So, very shortly, perhaps we are run out of time. Speaking about the energy market, so just a few words regarding this market.
Напрямок
On electricity market, it's very interesting direction. I believe that we need to talk about that. We had public hearings already in Fuel and Energy Committee. I believe that now we are ready to submit this draft to the Cabinet of Ministers. Now this draft is discussed more publicly than the gas market. Gas market law passed all the stages very successfully, and now at the stage of implementation we face some obstacles. The Parliament doesn't vote. The Ministry of Justice has not approved all the regulations of NERC. But I believe that's all temporary delay. Do we have slides? Very briefly. It's on electricity market.
Отак. Опс, трошки більше. Тут нічого не видно. Дивіться, ми ці презентації.
We will put all these presentations on our website. You will be able to see them. Just two main things about electricity market. Why do we believe that it has to be implemented? How the market is functioning? There are producers of electricity who sell this electricity. That is for own processes. They sell everything to energy market, and the energy market sells generation. And in fact, everything that is non-efficient happens because of this layer between generation and distribution.
В чому проблема? Проблема в тому, що
And the problem is because the producer doesn't have the possibility to fight for own consumer, and they don't fight for that because they sell everything to the energy market, and the energy market sells it to Oblenergo and on. And there are problems with payments. Now, for example, some companies do not pay. This could be water channels that legally are difficult to disconnect. Technologically, these are difficult to disconnect. There are certain technological conditions. But now these minimum technological volumes are reduced, and we do it to motivate the water channel and state companies, military companies, plants to pay. But in any case, if there's no intermediary, there will be a chance for the supplier to buy electricity from generation. We will give this function to the open market.
і, власне, суб'єкти
And the subjects will be forming the conditions for payment. It would be ideal if someone prepays. And in case the market forms the relation.
буде
Of course, we're going to have the supplier who will have special, let's say, obligations and commitments. It's done in the gas market. Who's going to provide the supplies for the population? But seriously speaking, we are talking about statistics. The population was not the worst customer. You are talking about the payment on the part of the population was rather, the high level, 95%, something like that. Much higher than 90%, but the average level of the payment for the supplies. Though again, of late, we decreased this kind of lack of efficiency, but in other words, the population, the best consumer. So the cancellation of this function of the energy market and is very important. The second step is the division of the functions of, let's say, of the delivering company and the transportation company. So we prepare the market in order to ensure some kind of competition for the end consumer. This will allow us to increase the quality of the services provided. Maybe the price will be more justified. And accordingly, it seems to me this is a very important step in order for those legislative changes to be implemented. Also, we are talking about certain work targeted as systemic operator. This function is carried out by Ukrenergo. Nowadays, Ukrenergo will divide the functions between the dispatching entity and the administrator of the overhead power lines. The only well, actually, they're doing that anyway, and they have to, to take care of this, and there will be some kind of dispatching function which will manage the market and the demand and supply regarding the electric power. I can see that you already showed the slides with the pros and cons, and of course we are going to fight the monopolies, the division of the supply and transportation functions, failure to pay, etc. The issue of subsidizing by the industry and the population. This is a separate, very big topic. We are working on that as well. But if you say that the market must be efficient, the cost both for the industry and for the population must be a market cost and shouldn't be put in the same basket. I mean, in some package, if you say that today the industrial tariff is 15% higher than in the European countries and our neighboring European countries, our industry can lose its competitiveness. And accordingly, well, it's known that this tariff is kind of increased for several reasons because of the losses within the grid, which are higher here than in European countries, about 5 to 6% higher, which is quite a big difference. And of course, the cost of subsidizing by the industry of the tariffs for the population, 40 billion on the size of subsidies, and we are talking about the 25% of the total cost. That's why it's really the issue which we have to take care of timely, this or another. We should not take some abrupt steps. We have to have a kind of gradual process in the work which we take for the gas and gas market. I'm talking about the work associated with subsidizing to those who really badly need those, like the vulnerable strata of the population. By all means, have to receive those subsidies in full measure. And what else? Actually, we can go with the slides. This is a new market. This will be a more complicated market. We are going to have the market of direct contracts, and understandably, what is going to happen there. Also, we have to have two dynamic markets, exchange markets, balancing market, and the market the day ahead, and the balancing market. So, do we have the slide with some visual explanation of the essence? When actually we try to, when you start to try to explain to those who are not competent something what we are doing, it's not easy to understand. We provide this kind of the diagram. Of course, this is just conditional for the experts. I'm emphasizing this is not the true to life diagram. So what would like to say that there is part of the electric power which is going to be sold based on the bilateral contracts, a long-term principle based on the well-understood principle of the price formation for some long period of time. And in addition to that, when we are going to change the situation, part of the electric power is going to be sold on the head market mostly. So and the internal daily market. So So everything is going to be balanced on those two markets, So and accordingly, those who could not get the necessary energy through those two markets, and but their demand for that increased through the kind of crawling market, which will be the most expensive one. They will actually they have the chance to fill those, to bridge those gaps. The cost of the day ahead market, and, the cost of the bilateral contract markets will be on the kind of contractual basis. On other markets through the exchange. And Ukrenergo will buy, purchase necessary equipment, the software, etc. So, in other words, we are talking about a lot of work associated with the test mode, and we propose to ensure to provide some kind of a transitional period in order to gradually form this kind of full-fledged market in different stages. The process is much more interesting than the one at the gas market because we really do not have any opportunity to provide storage, and because of that, the gas market doesn't work in full measure because of the lack of the storage capacities. In case of electric power, everything is happens in the real-time mode, So any kind of under delivery or let's say over delivery will be a balanced stock, So they have to assess. For example, if you're talking about the solar energy installations, if there is no sun, they will have to pay penalties because somebody will have to take care of the undershot, so to say, the lack of the energy they had to produce. But they can provide amount of energy to the market, but at different price. So do that, offering the so-called packages. So the system work will be very interesting indeed. Okay, I believe it's enough for today. Thank you, Minister. We have 20 minutes for the questions. Natalka Prudka-Головко, can you please tell me, are you going to, the Energoatom is going to construct the Khmelnytsky power unit number 3 and 4 together with the Czech Republic's Skoda, which has no license and never was involved in the in designing the nuclear reactors, and there were a lot of scandals around this issue. And the second question, in the Facebook, they provide a lot of information that the salary of the ministers is $50,000 per month. None of the ministers actually did not disavow it or said nothing against this. Okay, I'll start with Skoda. Of course, there is a lot of different ideas how to implement very good and correct projects. For example, the finishing construction of 2 of those power units. But I'm sure that without the preparation effort, without the tender, maybe tender in this specific case is not the best possible solution. But why? Because the participants on that side are very limited in number anyway. And the companies which are prepared to build such a power unit are just a few of those, But, let Skoda company prove that they can do that they have everything, all the preconditions, and, that they are capable of taking care inside of the works inside the reactor, all the rest of the efforts. You're talking about technological flow chart. I understand that they can involve through outsourcing several other participants. There are some questions about that. I'm sure that we have to announce the contest, some kind, I don't know, to kind of quasi-tender, but in the near future, because we already mentioned that we actually did away with the contract with the Russians. I'm not going to say term tender, but anyway, we're going to entertain the contest-based approach. Today, the power units being built in China very actively. They commission every year 5 to 6 power units, and certain units are constructed in Russia. In the United States, there are a lot of projects, but there are some delays. In Europe, for example, in Great Britain, in other countries, there is certain skepticism regarding nuclear power. Well, we are going to look for the partners, and then we are going to build it. So, Natalia, you put the question, let the minister a chance to answer those. So, what the essence of your question? That we are going to have an open contest or tender and find the best possible partner, but whether we are talking about the money from Barclays or somebody else, such projects cannot be taken care of by the companies which do not have their financial institutions, either their own or the partner financial institutions. So to us, finance is a very important factor because we are talking about the projects for decades ahead of us. Yeah, of course, the construction per se will take less time than that, but we are talking about the payback period. This will take not 1 decade. The partners can actually also give that money. But again, I emphasize we are going to entertain the contest approach. Speaking about $50,000 per month as a salary of minister, well, I can say about myself, for sure, I do not get that money. Unfortunately, I can speak for other ministers, but I think they do not have such big salary. Because when we meet, we always speak where to find money to finance our team. Because my average salary in the ministry 5,000 hryvnia, it's very difficult to motivate the people to become responsible and do something and to work, not to work with some other groups and not to take money from outside, whatever. This is a big problematic issue, and I'm sure we have to entertain a very systematic approach to resolve this problem, and I'm sure they will come up with some kind of mechanism to support the top echelon experts in the ministries. Speaking about the public enterprises or companies, we already started to switch over to more or less adequate salaries. For example, in those enterprises which work with us, they have the salaries like 50,000 hryvnia and more. So it seems to me that the people who sit on hundreds of millions or billions of money, they have to be paid adequately. For them not to look for some other money, externally. Trinka said that there is some agreement in order to increase the amount of the beneficial payment for natural gas up to a certain level. Is it just populism or whatever, and how much is going to change the deficit of Naftogaz? Yeah, this is going to increase Naftogaz deficit. Well, I'm not prepared to give you some figures, but this will considerably increase this deficit of Naftogaz because they will be forced to sell behind the limit of this margin more than 1,200 1,000 cubic meters, and we say that only 65 or 70% of gas will be consumed at the beneficial cost, and at least the 30% of the gas sold to the population would be based on the market price. By increasing this limit, only a small portion will remain beyond the boundaries of this limit, so we can make calculations. Something between 14 billion by one third, by the price of 600, you can make your calculations of the burden which is going to be shouldered by Naftogaz. What does it mean? I met last Friday with the representatives of IMF, and there was no talk regarding those things. I don't know, maybe something changed since Friday, but again, that was informal mission, representatives of several representatives of the local reps of the IMF, and we had a meeting, informal meeting with them. Maybe at the level of the ideas, that, for example, there is certain Mr. Leshko who demands such changes to be introduced. Maybe there were some talks behind the scenes about that, but officially, no. You can say the Radio Liberty, you start to talk about the diversification of energy carriers supply. Can you give us an approximate figure? What would be the share of coal from the South Africa and to the territories which controlled by the militant separatists, and what kind of share we have contracted they're going to receive from Russian Federation and from the Western countries. Now I'll start. It's easier to say about the nuclear fuel. Out of 13 deliveries which we received over the year, one is the Westinghouse one, and this 12 from 12 company, and next year we're going to have 5 from 12. So we increase the proportion, 5 out of 13. That's why, speaking in principle, this process goes on. As relates to coal from the South Africa, this year, during the first 6 months, I believe it was about 1 million tons. Now, by the end of the year, we'll have approximately not more than 400,000. I know the volume. I know that there are some orders placed from the heat power plants. So I'm talking about approximately 400, and if we're talking about the ultimate market or the integrated market, as far as I remember, no less than 24 million. So in other words, this is a relatively small volume from Russia during the first 6 months of this year. And I'm talking about the energy coal. May I remind you, if you're talking about the coal, I do not follow that. I do not monitor those flows. And now, less than 100,000 tons of coal we received during this year. Maybe 150, 200 thousand more will receive. But again, the contracts have been signed for thousands, but the realistic volume will be, or amount will be much less than that. So 95% I would say the share is Ukrainian from the controlled territory, part of that from uncontrolled. DTEC actively moves away the coal from the territory not controlled by Ukrainian government, about 30,000 daily. Tons, we can provide you with statistical data if you're interested in that. This is what can tell you the figures, approximate figures. Next question. Lydia Garmash, Источник Info. Mr. Minister, in the Dnipropetrovsk mass media, they carried the information that the main part of the city, they had interruption power supply during the weekend, and the operator of the local dispatching center gave the command to decrease the supply. And he explained this necessity to export electric power from Russia. Is there really such a necessity or need, and what is the reason for that? Are you talking about the electric power supply? Yes? So Dnipropetrovsk, this is part of the energy of the electric power grid. That's why the energy supply or provision is subordinated to the total operational total system. They take from the total grid or the general grid, and then they have to take care of the balancing of the peak loads. Again, I would say that we have to take care of statistics, but at certain periods, the load on the power plants can be increased or decreased depending on the consumption. For example, now consumption is less than it has been scheduled because of the warm weather from point of view of the electric power supply. But import in no way is associated or connected with balancing or loading the system. We receive imported power because one of the power units in Rivne was disconnected from the system due to the completion of construction of the facilities. This we are talking about 1,000 megawatt, which have not been connected to the system, and we received today 400 kilowatts imported, and each day or each week is different. In Wednesday, most likely we will stop to get any power or energy from the Russian Federation. This technological step, and there are a lot of examples when the existing capacitors are not used to full measure. And some of the power units are underloaded, which could be switched on, let's say in the colder weather. They are not used now. Well, but again, this discussion is meant for the experts, not for the other type of audience. Import we receive on the closing principle. Novin and Donbass. Speaking about the conflict around the Krasnolimansk mine, are there any conclusions based on the audit visit? You remember they did not allow the auditors to get out there. Our team is very limited in our opportunities. We did not finish that process, but this enterprise at this point of time, there was a change of the top management, and today, perhaps you know that about 10 days ago there was an emission, escape of methane gas, and they stopped the operation of that mine. Another portion of that mine is operational, and they now carry out some kind of the repair and the mining and rescue work. Unfortunately, in the process of those works, it's about 10 days ago, one of the rescuers actually died, but this happened some time ago, so you can find the statistics. So we had a very an unpleasant situation in Krasnolimansk, specifically from point of view of technological other situation. And also we reached the agreement with the trade unions and the local councils that the new manager will try to take care of the situation associated with this accident and to renovate the operation this mine in the near future. Well, it partially still is operating with less than 40%. Speaking about the conflict by of the founders of the private enterprise, no, they were not allowed to be there. You know, my position is very simple. The law enforcement bodies have to take care of this situation. I gave them all the information. I believe that those reserves should be returned to the public property. In other words, DP must work in those reserves, but we're talking about those reserves which were issued. Well, I have my own position, but what decision would be legally correct or passed by some other bodies or agencies, I cannot say anything about that. 3 minutes. You mentioned a lot that a lot in your activities depends on the legislative and the work. And first of all, we are talking about reform. So, what your problems you encounter if you're talking about your cooperation with the Parliament of Ukraine? Are you happy with the quality of their work, etc.? You know, the loan and the gas market had to. Yeah, well, actually, it has been commissioned, but it doesn't operate in full measure since October the 1st. In this case, it would be much comfortable if those 3325 or 3074 laws were adopted, well, let's say 45 days ago. Unfortunately, they failed to do that. Speaking about the Verkhovna Rada, of course, we have some requests to Verkhovna Rada regarding the regulator issue, etc. In my turn, I actively cooperate with the committee, PAC committee, in other committees if need be. That's why I cannot say that that I'm the reason of that delay. You can see that sometimes the MPs do not want to vote for those draft laws, which actually this or another way were discussed or considered within the framework of the coalition agreement, which is badly needed today by our country. If there are some claims regarding specific items or articles, we are prepared to work on them. But when we see that there is no wish to vote, generally speaking, it's a different story. And there are some cases. Any other questions? I can see that another team is. We still have another question. In the National Committee on the Regulation of Energy, there is a draft law on the consumption of power energy. Who has to pay that? By the household, consumers, or anybody else? Well, I'm not sure. Well, you see, you're asking him not being sure what you're asking. So I'm not going to try to. You're talking about industry. Industry has to pay to provide advanced payment or in advance, or there must be some kind of agreements between the country agency if they are solvent enough, if there is the credit of trust, they can actually pay with some delay, but everybody has to be sure that they're going to pay for that. In the case of the population, this is a more difficult issue. We have to study, to look into it more thoroughly. I suspect that the problem is because there are a lot of participants in which Energy will try to make use of this situation for their own benefit. Speaking in principle, it seems to me we are managed to bring the level of the payment to 100%, there will be no problem. But since we do not have 100% settlement of payments, and since there are some problems with the evaluation, for example, do you consume electric power at one cost of the production or generation of energy, and they pay in the end of the year under absolutely different conditions, then there is a problem with liquidity for the generator. Lack of the payment, they do not provide the possibility to take care of repairing the overhead lines and maintenance of that, etc., etc. Unfortunately, this lack of paying in time of payment, timely payment is one of the reasons why Later, they have some limitations in the capacities or generation. We constantly receive the claims or complaints. There are some villages where the voltage is 180 kilovolt. Actually, this is the problem of the financial resource. So, the distribution companies are underfinanced, and very often because of the lack of payment or the failure to pay. And there is no reason to talk about it now. 22 billion indebtedness of the consumers for the consumed electric power. This is over a long period of time, but those funds were not received by the generation or generators, including the Energatom. This is a serious problem. That's why I set myself a task at least to maximize the level of the payment at this point of time. I understand that we have to do something about the debts. Some decision must be taken either to restructure those in some way, if you understand that those are the public-run enterprises who are among the debtors, and maybe we can do that through the using different instruments, including the taxes. We have a team which analyzes. We have a financial department. So I believe that we are going to work on some proposals. Thank you for your questions and goodbye. Thank you. Next briefing is in 2 minutes from now. The topic is whether is Crimean political prisoner Gennady Afanasyev